Welcome to Slow News Day Live. My name is Steve Poikinen. I'm here in beautiful Boulder Creek, California. And if you've been paying attention to the show over the last couple of weeks, you have you've heard us talk about how the Green Party has handled their primary. If you were with us on Monday evening, we had Ian Schlackman on for a really just bullshit free, no holds barred barn burner of an interview. And the next day, I woke up and had an email in my inbox, and it was from Dario Hunter, and he said, "Hey, I think I want to come on too and have a conversation with you." And since Dario's a friend of the show and an all around decent human being, I said, "Well, that sounds like a fucking killer idea." So, ladies and gentlemen, this evening I'm joined once again by Dario Hunter, newly announced independent candidate for president. We're going to find out exactly why that is. Dario, how you doing, man? It's good to see you again.
I'm great. How are you?
I'm still kicking. Doing all right. It's been a rough work week for me, but I'm got nothing to do but do my shows for the weekend and hopefully recuperate a little bit, and I'm looking forward to that, and I'm looking forward to this. Um like I said just a minute ago, when the results for the Green Party primary came down, it wasn't that big of a surprise because we had known going back almost as far as last summer that they were not necessarily um, the playing to have an equitable primary, I guess, is the most diplomatic way of saying that. But diplomacy aside, it really looks like they took a lot of notes from the way that the DNC handled the primary in 2016 and said, we can do better than that. But I'm certainly interested
Yeah.
to hear your take and your experience for this, because the last time that we talked, um, you were playing rather nice. I thought you could um, maybe go in with sharper elbows, but that's just me. And now that we're here and you have officially launched your campaign as an independent, I would love to get your take on what went down.
First of all, thank you so much for having me back again. It's just such a pleasure to be here with you and to talk about some things that are positive, how we're going to move forward together, and of course, talk about, unfortunately, some of the negative things that have precipitated how exactly we're going to take that path forward towards a fairer and a greener America. You mentioned the rigging in this green primary that just happened. Now, for those out there watching who didn't see the first time I was on the show, don't know much about the Green Party, don't know much about me. By way of introduction, I'm Dario Hunter. I'm a former member of the Youngstown, Ohio Board of Education. I am a fighter. I fought a nasty state school takeover that really was a part and parcel of educational racism that exists all across this country. I've fought against fracking in that same community in Youngstown, Ohio. And most recently, I fought for Palestinian rights. At the start of my campaign, that fight, those statements I made in support of Palestinians and against the human rights abuses of Israel, that lost me my job. And it really set off a domino effect for me personally in terms of personal cost. I were anything guard, but that is how it turned out. And pointing that out is relevant to what we're discussing here because it illustrates that I'm not the kind of person that takes things lying down. Okay. I'm willing to put myself on the line, even my own personal benefit and costs on the line in order to support the right side of things. Now, very early on in this Green Party primary, when I started off as a candidate, I'd hoped at the beginning that, of course, we were planning to win and planning to win big. Every campaign that really wants to succeed and isn't just a front for something else, that's what you have in mind. But I always had in the back of my mind that even if that did not happen, that hopefully the party would be able to rally around a candidate that we could all support, and that my ideas would be a part of the larger conversation in the Green Party and the larger national political conversation. That is not how things have turned out. What happened very early on was that it was clear that a particular establishment candidate had the fix in for him. And that person is Howie Hawkins. Now, him and his campaign make a lot of his long years of engagement with the party. That being said, I was the only person in the race who had actually held political office before. I won a grassroots campaign as a write-in candidate for Youngstown Board of Ed. And when I say I fought environmental racism, I did so as an elected representative of the citizens of the city of Youngstown, Ohio. And that was part of what I brought to the table. There were people in the party who, for a number of reasons, just wanted to push this man forward. Now, they might claim a number of rationales for it. His long service with the party, it's just his turn, he has a better platform. That last part absolutely isn't true, and we'll get into that in more detail. And it is in fact true that he's been with the party for some years, but one can also sort out exactly what he has and hasn't done in that time period. That's worth examining as well. But none of that really mattered to the people that were pushing him forward. He was their guy, and that was it, for whatever nefarious reasons they might have behind that. And so the race started with the party putting forward promo for Hawkins in a way that they did for no other candidate, in a way that they weren't willing to do for any other candidate. The website had promo for the Hawkins campaign on the regular. There were exclusive events from Green state parties for Hawkins that they would not extend the same opportunities for other candidates. I know this as a fact because we asked for equal opportunity. And we have threads of emails proving the back and forth between our campaign and various state parties. Connecticut, where they had a special fundraiser for him and would not extend the same opportunity. Illinois, where they did the same thing. I had to show up and speak off the agenda at lunch. This was early on at the campaign. And choose speaker. And I was also told that no other candidates would be allowed to speak, so I spoke during their lunch period. Missouri was particularly interesting because they had a Green New Deal panel, and he was the only candidate allowed. And after having a polite back and forth with the chair of the party, I finally just got up, took a chair, sat down, and joined the panel. And that was the end of it. Guess they didn't want to have an open public fight with me, but if they had, I would have gave as good as I got, because I wasn't taking it lying down. And I point this out to not only illustrate the kind of things they were doing from the very beginning and early on, but to also illustrate that we had been fighting against it from the very beginning and pushing back against it. So the successes that our campaign had, despite the rigging, they didn't come out of nowhere. And our campaign got more states than Nader had against McKinney. We got more states and delegates than Roseanne Barr got, and she's a little bit more well-known than we are, the merit of her candidacy aside. And that didn't come from nowhere. Okay? We pushed very hard up against the rigging. And back in the summer of 2019, before any primaries had taken place, I gave a rather fiery speech at the annual national meeting against all the things that had been transpiring, the special promo for Hawkins, at the time, the apparent conflict of interest with Maria, the manager of Hawkins' campaign, who was also a co-chair for the party at the same time, being at that meeting, subsidized by the party at which she was also campaigning for Hawkins. Massive conflict of interest. And so time and time again, in peeling back the layers on this, you see these conflicts of interest, whether it's North Carolina and its state leadership listed on the Hawkins website as supporters with pictures, while they're also deciding to cut out every other candidate from the ballot in North Carolina except for Hawkins, or Colorado, where once again, Andrea Marita Cuellar was the co-chair of that party, presiding over their primary. And there were complaints from local Greens in Colorado against that. They lodged a complaint, one of many complaints. Okay, so fast forward a bit. After all of this taking place over a long period of time, completely unchecked, completely swept under the rug, this is how you got the hot mess that was this recent Green Party convention. For one thing, there were already multiple complaints on the table at that time. Colorado's complaint, the complaint from Green locals in North Carolina over the shutting out of every candidate except for Hawkins. And then you had complaints regarding Texas, where Hawkins won less than half the delegates. So, I'm sorry, he won less than half the votes, but got 77% of the delegates. And the Young Eco-Socialists caucus, where some of our delegates complained on an issue that really did not have any benefit in terms of delegates for us, but was an issue in regards to ethics and democracy, over the fact that Hawkins was given all of the delegates, even though the math didn't really pan out for that, and Jesse Ventura should have gotten at least one. So all of these complaints are on the table. What does the party do with them? This party that says that it supports grassroots democracy, that it supports ethical values in regards to our democracy, that it stands in opposition to all the things you see from the Democratic Party, the rigging, the shutouts, what they did to Bernie, what they did to Tulsi. What they did was the same kind of crap that you'd expect to get from the DNC. They pretty much swept it all under the rug. They dismissed them all on technicalities. They put the report from CredCom in front of the convention. No one got to really debate or discuss it, and it's just passed on through. Only people that got to argue about what had transpired in this rigged primary were the few presidential candidates that were allowed to speak. And by the way, they narrowed down that process too in order to shut people out. And for the few measly 5 minutes that each of those persons got, they were able to talk about the rigging that happened in that race. Every other aspect of the convention was choreographed to be squeaky clean and Cloroxed of any hint of the disgusting rigging, undemocratic, and unethical practices that had taken place. But as I've just recounted to you, those instances are legion. And so that's how we find ourselves at this moment we're at right now. Right after that convention, I made it very clear that I was not going to accept Hawkins as the nominee. And in fact, before that convention, I made it clear that unless the party had resolved these issues, unless they addressed them, there was no way we were going to be rallying together to support this rigged primary. It's not going to happen. We are running an independent candidacy, myself and Darlene Elias, my running mate, who was a former co-chair of the party, social justice activist, housing activist, or activist for women's rights, for Latinx rights. We're running this independent candidacy to give Greens a real choice, and all Americans a real choice on the left, because the Green Party has unfortunately chosen to abandon them and to abandon ethics and abandon any true sense of democracy. We exist to provide that genuine choice for Americans. And we put forward a genuine left agenda. Put aside all of the rigging, as bad as it is. And what you have in Howie Hawkins is a candidacy that is nowhere near left. The man's a Russiagator. This is on tape. No matter how much his campaign tried to deny it or say, as they said on the Ron Placone interview, that he was tired and hungry, because we all know that if you don't have a Snickers bar, I guess, you start spouting CIA talking points.
Right, right. That's how that works.
Yeah, that's how it works. Got to defeat that hunger, otherwise you become a tool of the CIA. It's ludicrous that he gets away with this, and that's all just wrapped up in the privilege that he's been given by the party.
So I got a couple of questions here, real quick. Sorry to interrupt you, but
not at all.
So on Monday, Ian Schlackman had flat the fuck out said that the reason that the Green Party has gone this route is that there's been a not necessarily silent or bloody takeover, by a faction called the Green Party Power Faction or Power Coalition, something to that nature. And that AMC, Kevin Zeese, Margaret Flowers, and a handful of their loyalists are blatantly controlling the machinations of the party, not because Howie Hawkins is, the bright, fresh-faced hope of the Green Party, not because his platform is a platform that is quintessentially green, but because it will increase their own personal power base. Now, is that something that you would
Sure.
co-sign, or do you have a different take on that?
It's not a matter of co-signing, it's what's happening.
Fair
And
enough.
that's what's happening. It's what's happening, and it doesn't matter what comes out of his mouth, whatever kooky thing he says about Russiagate, when he says things like righteous deployments in response to questions about war and opposing it, when he supports ridiculous democratic perspectives on Syria, when he spouts all kinds of garbage, none of it matters to the team that's behind him, because they just want to stay in power. They want to be in power and to maintain and stay in power, which is essentially very democratic political emotion.
Oh,
Okay.
yeah.
And anytime you run up against that, they will, just like the Democrats, they will squash you. You see Tulsi, who was bucking the trend in the party. And what did they do to her? This is what you're witnessing out of the Green Party as well right now. And it really is a shame because people expected more, but that's not what they're getting.
Yeah, that's what amazes me so much is that the Green Party actually had a fairly diverse and way younger than normal field for the Green Party. And it was, I mean, um Ian, Chad, like a number of other people that had thrown their name into the ring and really brought, a genuine grassroots, like, let me put it to you this way. I know for a fact that Ian Schlackman is out in the streets walking the walk because he came down to DC with Reverend Annie to stand with us in front of the prison that was then housing Chelsea Manning and Jeremy Hammond. And we'd interviewed both of them recently. They're in the middle of passing out food on the street of Baltimore. I know from talking to you, you are a legitimate grassroots activist currently. And it seems like the sort of activism that Hawkins is engaged in and has been engaged in for the better part of a decade now is yeah, like from an armchair, unless it's to get headlines, not for a cause, but for Howie Hawkins. It's a very self-aggrandizing style of activism that is honestly like one of the things that made me throw my fucking hands up and walk away from politics altogether and become more involved in direct action, become more involved in information activism and things of that nature. um it's hard to see a way forward for the Greens if this is the example that they're setting and this is the style of leadership that they're rewarding. And it can become sort of a cottage money making industry, but at no point is that going to get them that magic 5% of the vote, let alone a pathway to the White House.
What makes you think everyone involved in this wants to?
Well, and again, so the alternative would be it's a nice cottage money making industry.
Bingo. I mean, for some people, that may be it. And I can't scoop out the contents of people's brains and indicate exactly for whom that's the case. And there's so much machinations going on around all of this that untangling it is not something that I could quite confidently and precisely do right here. Now, I think we all smell and sense, the basic gist of what's happening here. But the exactitude of it is, I'm sure, a bit more complex than that. That being said, they really aren't positioning themselves for success, for 5%, for getting towards that goal. And it certainly would be very helpful to people outside of the Green Party if they didn't. So this is definitely a bonanza for them. They're winning this game more than anyone else, those who would like to squash the Green Party. And so one wonders exactly what's all this in aid of? What was all of this rigging truly in aid of? Was it just for Howie Hawkins to win, or was it for a much larger purpose, external perhaps to the Green Party itself?
And that's always going to be a valid question. Whenever I take a look at the motives of an organization, one of the first things that I do is try to ascertain how much the rank and file are valued within the organization. And if the rank and file and their desires or their concerns get no floor time or get swept to the side, then that tells me right away that this is an organization more about consolidating its own personal power base and hopefully lining a pocket or three than anything that the marketing has suggested. You know what I mean?
But you know what? Here's the thing. There are people who have been organizing with the Green Party for decades and were calling out this rigging, and they weren't listened to either. People in leadership who just weren't on the same side of the fence as this nefarious cabal that put forward and maintained the rigging for Hawkins. So it isn't just a straight division between leadership and rank and file. It's more complex than that and more partisan than that. This is a group that wants Hawkins to be put forward at all costs, and whoever gets in their way, rank and file members or people who've been in leadership for decades, doesn't matter. They're going to push past that, and that's what they've demonstrated, and that's what they've done to the party's detriment.
No, I mean, look, I've talked about this a little bit before, but about 20 years ago, I was a Green Party member, and one of the things that that kind of made me want to up and leave the party, which I eventually did, was because it wasn't so much that there was like a faction within the party that was just stomping over the will of everyone around them in order to get their way, but you could sense it in the awning. You could sense that there was going to be, it was ripe for takeover, because it really, when you've got even the leadership that comes out of a grassroots activism or becoming disaffected with the power structures within the duopoly that made them want to leave that duopoly in the first place and seek a third party out, that's ripe for, I guess, grift or plunder, because when you're that disaffected, when you've been that disenfranchised, the two things that you really want are hope and confirmation of your biases. And if someone can deliver that in a shiny package, then you're caught by the words and you're not necessarily looking at the actions. I don't know if that makes any sense or not. But it seems like it's, for example, okay, putting Howie Hawkins aside for a second, it almost looked like Jesse Ventura was going to be able to waltz in while doing no campaigning, while not putting in the work that goes into a primary, let alone assembling a staff of people and going out and knocking doors. It looked like that was going to might have a chance of happening. And the reason was,
no,
he talked a decent game in terms of the way that all of these disaffected progressives gave them something to respond to. My position the entire time was Jesse Ventura doesn't deserve to be on the ballot in the Green Party because he hadn't done any of the work. Now, that's even aside from the fact that I don't really consider Jesse Ventura to be a Green, but it really looked like it could head that way. And I got to tell you, Dario, I'm pretty glad that it didn't. Not for Howie's sake and not for your sake, but just because that would have been even more blatant rigging than what we've seen with Howie.
Well, here's what I have to say about that. And I was shaking my head the moment you raised this issue with Jesse Ventura. I was shaking my head not in disapproval of Ventura, but because that was never going to happen. And I made it clear every time the issue was raised that that was never going to happen. And unfortunately, some people who were very supportive of Ventura saw in that a knocking of Ventura because they were just so very eager to see him get the nomination. What they weren't hearing or paying attention to was the essential truth behind that. The truth being that the party was never going to let that happen. And I let everybody know the party was never going to let that happen, not because I have any control over it, but because having dealt with them for at this point a year and a half, I'm very clear on how they managed to position everything and rig everything to get what they want. They were never going to allow an in for Jesse Ventura or anybody else who would upset the apple cart for their candidate. And so a lot of people came up disappointed from the convention who were supporting Ventura because they hoped for some last minute miracle. You know, they kept telling me when I said, never going to happen. They said, well, that's up to the delegates. And I'm just reading their messages and saying, you really have no clue. They've rigged this a year and a half in advance, 2 years in advance, probably much earlier. It's set, it's happening. You're not getting Ventura, you're not getting anyone else. And unless you pay attention to the reality of what's happening, they're going to do it and they're going to get away with it. They were so bedazzled with the idea of someone else swooping in to this already closed circle and forcing these people who spent a year and a half setting up this elaborate ruse and elaborate rig to suddenly, immediately abandon it. How do you think that was going to work? Was going to happen? Even when, especially when Ventura did not declare candidacy. Now, here's the fine point I have to note here. If Jesse Ventura had declared candidacy and he had pursued it in earnest, he absolutely could have overwhelmed the Green Party primary. He could have. He has a level of celebrity that surpasses anybody, even conjectured up to that point, to join the Green Party race. So if he wanted to, he could have. He never did so. He never became a candidate. And there was never potential opening for a draft campaign like the one that was coalescing around his name to ever blow past the massive rigging in the Green Party. It was not going to happen. And that's not even getting into a discussion of whether he would be a suitable candidate, what his platform might be. He wasn't a candidate, so he doesn't have a platform. So there's nothing, frankly, for me to assess in that regard. All I'm assessing is how deeply rigged the primary was. And anybody who supported anyone other than Hawkins, whether just the draft campaign for a candidacy from Ventura that never materialized, anybody in that camp should be rattling the cages, should be yelling from the mountaintops about what happened in this primary, and making it end, making sure the party's held responsible because they're continuing to push forward with the results of this rigging. They can't get away with that. You can't let them get away with that.
To my knowledge, this Green primary is the only one, at least that I can remember, that has been contested by every single candidate not named Howie Hawkins. And every single candidate has refused to throw their support behind the nominee. This is kind of anomalous in political parties. And I think it speaks to, well, A, the character of the people who are running, who have decided not to support Howie Hawkins in this matter, but B, it's an example of what happens when you take a political party that's made up of grassroots activists and disenfranchised voters from the duopoly, and then show them that you are not just capable of treating your leadership and your supporters like the DNC does, but that you can kind of kick it up a notch in terms of pushing out really tens of thousands of people from the process along the way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's really unfortunate the way the Green Party has treated this primary and the attitude and perspective that it's displayed. The party has, and outside observers have noticed this, would-be New Greens, taken on a rather country club mentality. Either you're on board with what we're pushing forward, or we don't need you. We don't need New Greens. Hey, you people want to come on board supporting Ventura? Hey, we don't really need you. Bye. We don't need you. And it really is just, it's a sign of a leadership that isn't so much interested in growth as it is in what it can get out of maintaining the party's small, closed circle status. When you have more people, you also have more scrutiny. In addition to having that new blood that will introduce innovations and changes that might upset the apple cart for whatever benefits you're getting, whatever it is you're getting out of pushing forward this kind of rigged system. So you don't want people coming in to the fold. You don't want people understanding or learning about what's going on, and you don't want people upsetting the game you've got going. And that's what's been keeping the Green Party small, because people have been actively repelled from participating. And we saw this in this primary. This is what's killing the Green Party. Jimmy Dore said famously that Howie Hawkins' death of the Green Party, I wouldn't give him that much credit. There's far too many people in leadership that are behind what's been happening. There's far too many hands that have brought about this set of circumstances that's killing the Green Party. And unless they get booted out of leadership, he's never able to grow, because it's always going to push away anybody with half a smidgen of sense to stop the rigging and put forward a truly leftist agenda, which is what their nominee is absolutely not doing.
So invariably, when people who have been, I guess, pushed out and more or less robbed by their own party come forward to discuss this, you've always got a couple of like quasi bootlicking dipshits who go, "You're damaging the party. You're hurting the party by telling people what happened to you." Now my response has been, don't rig the fucking primary, and people won't have to come forward to say, hey, you rigged the primary. But what how do you handle that? Because I know it's got to be happening to you.
Frankly, I could care less. If your perspective is that you're more concerned about uniting a party that has become fundamentally unethical, corrupt, and undemocratic, if that's your concern, rather than addressing the ethical issues, rather than addressing the lack of democratic processes, rather than addressing the fact that a cabal has pushed forward a candidate that doesn't represent your values, if that's what you want to focus on, then you really aren't anywhere near the focus of my personal and campaign agenda. And so I could care less. I see you're running some kind of game, and with the utmost of sarcasm, good luck to you with that. I'm not going to entertain it in any way, shape, or form, or give it any kind of legitimacy. And if you keep pushing it forward, I'm going to push past you. As we've already demonstrated in the introduction that I gave, I'm very capable of doing.
Yeah, and I think really, I like the people that have that mentality might as well just go register as a Democrat and get lied to by someone with a little bit more polish. I don't know, but let's talk
but then
about.
they wouldn't get the benefits they're getting from rigging this small pool. The thing is, they're not trying this in the Democratic Party because these are small time gamesters. They're able to run their game in the context of this very small pool and get what they want to get out of it, but they would never make it in Democrat circles. And look, I was in a one-party Democrat town, Youngstown, Ohio. I know how their rigging works, and in Youngstown, Ohio in particular, some of it's very low vibration and very basic as well. but they would be in a long line, a long list of bottom feeders trying to profit off of people's misery. In the Green Party, they got a concentrated small pool, and they want to keep it that way. The leadership that's doing this wants to keep it that way. They're in the party for a purpose. It's a very specific pool of graft going on.
No, you're absolutely right. And again, man, it it doesn't it doesn't make any sense from a political standpoint to do this with the Green Party, but it makes a lot of sense to do it from a personal gain standpoint. But that's got a timeline. There's only so many years of graft that you can get away with without like either being taken over by someone who's got more resources to do more graft, or you strangle all the life completely out of the base of the party. And it just, like, short-term personal gain is maybe rewarding on the front end, but if you've hollowed out the middle, or if you've hollowed out your own center, then the only thing that can occur is a giant dropping out, a giant bottoming out of that party's base. And once that happens, you might be left with a pile of cash, but you can't continue the grift anymore.
Well, they're not here to bury the bones of the party. All of that is going to happen beyond what they're engaged in. Their hands clean. They're not too worried what happens when that's all done. And that's what grifting is all about. Whether you're grifting in the Democratic Party or any other party. Once again, Youngstown, Ohio, you had a lot of bottom feeders that were engaged in all kinds of efforts within the party, the Democratic Party there, and outside of it in many pop-up nonprofits that were sucking up governmental money. You suck up as much money, as much privilege, as much power, as much personal gain as you can until a party's over. And then you bring down the big tent and you move it to the next town. That's what people like that do.
So there's I don't know, a mosquito in my chat right now who's buzzing around trying to fucking solely focused on the North Carolina voting, who has thus far overlooked the entire scope of the conversation outside of Howie Hawkins was the only candidate on the ballot in North Carolina. And alleging that no other candidate was serious enough to jump through all of the hoops in order to get onto the ballot in that state. Can we put this to rest once and for all, Dario?
Yes, let's put it to rest. North Carolina had fundraising requirements that were 5 times the national recognition requirements. And what I mean when I say national recognition requirements, the Green Party has this bogus process they make you go through to be recognized as recognized nationally by the party as a candidate. Okay, I don't think they should have such a process. They should just put anybody who wants to run on all of the ballots and give them equal promo and let the voters choose, because that would be quick. But hey, that's not what the party does. That process had a certain fundraising benchmark, and the North Carolina party exceeded that by 5 times. Now, it's interesting that they chose to do that and to make that information about that choice available at the time that they did in 2019, because around that same time, only one candidate had measured up to that fundraising scale. Guess which one? So the leaders of the party, who were solidly on Hawkins' team, who were listed as on his team and as supporters on his website, got together and decided to put in place fundraising requirements 5 times the national fundraising requirements for recognition, which only Hawkins at the time met. There is no reason why all of the candidates active at that time could not or should not have been put on a ballot. The Libertarian Party put 16 names on the North Carolina ballot. It is embarrassing for a party that claims that it supports grassroots democracy and open ballot access, because the party's been shut out from ballot access time and time again, and open debates. It's embarrassing for a party that claims that that's what they represent and support to in any way, shape, or form shut out candidates internally in its own party, especially in the egregious way that North Carolina did. How do you even call it a primary? You had one person on the ballot, and it wasn't because only one person ran, it was because that was the only name you put forward. How do you even call it a primary? Nobody's buying your BS. Nobody.
I have a sneaking suspicion that that's not going to be enough for this one particular person, but fuck him, really.
Well, depending on who that person is, because the Hawkins team has a very energetic team of trolls that get deployed anytime anyone mentions what's happening in the primary. And when I say team, I mean team. There are people who support campaigns and get very ornery on the internet about their support, but these are actual, in many cases, actual members of the Hawkins team that seem to spend nothing but, every waking hour just trolling on the internet. So once again, good luck to them. I mean, with the highest sarcasm, good luck to you and all that. We're going to be busy talking about actual leftist values, which your campaign and your candidate doesn't. So
let's do that real quick. You did continue your campaign. You're now running as an unaffiliated independent. Personally, I think that you've got as good a shot of getting the same number or a greater number of votes as Howie Hawkins, especially when and I read this I can't remember where, but if you took away the state of California, Howie Hawkins would have wound up with, I think, less than 100 delegates total. And I'm not sure if that's or a very just a almost an insignificant number of people that had signed up to vote in support for Howie Hawkins. Now Ian's told me a little bit about just how concentrated an effort that the faction within the Green Party put into the state of California. But I want to talk about what your platform is, what you bring to the table, and how, man, I would love to see like a third party candidate debate. I would really and I'll see if there's some way that we can all get together and independent media and host that, or try and make it happen. But what does candidate Dario Hunter have that the I think half dozen or so other presidential candidates, what do you have that they don't?
Well, first of all, I have to point out some of the things that would be common to any Green candidacy, especially for people who are watching who aren't familiar with the Green Party and its platform. Some of the things that any Green candidate would put forward might include Medicare for all, the housing, food, water, shelter, utilities, free pre-K and college, all of these things guaranteed for all, a genuine living wage for all Americans. These are the kind of things that the Green Party represents. They didn't quite represent those values in the form of Howie Hawkins, and that's part of how we find ourselves in the place that we're in right now. The Green New Deal was also very elemental to the Green platform. But what distinguishes our campaign? Our campaign is an independent campaign, puts forward, in addition to the Green New Deal, the Green Path Forward. We recognize that the Green New Deal and its effort towards 100% renewable energy isn't the full picture in regards to resolving our climate change catastrophe. We need to reframe diplomacy. We have to completely reframe diplomacy internationally in order to work shoulder to shoulder with with some of the world's top carbon emitters. We're talking Russia, we're talking China. We have to work with these countries to save the planet together. And there's been a lot of saber rattling as of late. We have to deal with other pollution crises. We have to deal with plastic pollution. We have to deal with nitrogen and phosphorus pollution. And we have to deal with the effects of big ag. Okay, anyone who watched what happened in the Amazon, the burning of the Amazon, hopefully you got the backstory on that had to do with Bolsonaro letting loose the ranchers, that had to do with the rapacious effect of agriculture and its the license that had been given to destroy the environment by Bolsonaro's administration in Brazil. So we have to deal with that internationally and work together with the rest of the planet to tackle those issues internationally. And I have to point out the fact that our campaign has been at the forefront of addressing the issues that have become a major focus in public activism as of late, but we've been doing this for a year and a half. The issues that affect the massive disparities experienced by people of color in this country, disparities in terms of education, in terms of environmental impact, in terms of our justice system. And so our campaign has put forward the People of Color Bill of Rights. And it is a platform plank recognizing that despite what rights are said to be on the books for all Americans, this certainly is not the experience for millions and millions of Americans. So we are tackling the fact that our justice system is an injustice system. We are dealing with the fact that we have a broken public defender system, and we have Black youths who are put in front of a public defender only to be told, look, just plead guilty. Plead guilty and take 30 years. You're not going to win anyway, whether or not they're guilty or innocent. We're dealing with the fact as a country that we still have redlining all across this country, segregation in neighborhoods all across this country, in over 60 metro areas across this country. Community Reinvestment Act, the Carter era, has not solved this problem. Banks have been working around it for years. And that brings me to the banking and finance industry, where people of color have been shut out systematically for decades upon decades, for eons. The healthcare disparities are legion, lack of adequate healthcare, hospitals, clinics in inner city neighborhoods. There's also an issue that rural neighborhoods are affected by as well, which speaks to the general community building needs that our country has and that our campaign will focus on unlike any other. And of course, reparations. Reparations now, yes, but really reparations yesterday, reparations decades ago, reparations a long time ago. It's overdue. This country has debt that has to be repaid to descendants of people enslaved. And of course, a reparative process for this nation's indigenous nations, indigenous peoples. And so there's so much to do, and our campaign is focused, laser focused on pushing these issues to the forefront. We also have a very robust platform in regards to COVID-19. And once again, some of those features are things you may see from other leftist campaigns. Medicare for all, yes, nationalizing the medical supply, but we were at the forefront in the Green campaign of no rent, no mortgage, no evictions for the duration of the crisis. Hawkins pushed back against us on this and said, well, what will that do to the smaller landlords? Doesn't sound very socialist or leftist to me. But
sounds like somebody who has a bunch of friends that are property owners, to be honest with you.
Possibly, but then again, that small business refrain, and I'm not against small business, but that kind of refrain is often something you hear out of the Republican Party, usually as a cover for providing a favorable set of circumstances for businesses that definitely aren't small. And it's been a very negative line of attack against any effort to actually genuinely help everyday Americans. So our COVID-19 plan wants to ensure we invest in community infrastructure. So we have not only strong medical infrastructure, but food supplies, healthy food to all Americans. So many communities just don't have access to produce. South side of Youngstown, where I served as a member of the Board of Ed, this was a major issue. We got to get housing available for every American. California is leading the housing crisis. And in every major city you go to in that state, you will see tent cities out on the street. It's unconscionable in a country with so much wealth. And of course, we must end war and end sanctions. We can devote those resources to helping humanity as a whole, not just to recover from COVID-19, but from the many man-made created crises that are a byproduct of rapacious capitalism. So we are not just, as the Hawkins team might claim, an anti-war campaign, a phrase frankly by them and others has been so much misused. We're a no war campaign, none, period. We're not slicing a little bit off the top. We're not coming at you with a kinder, gentler machine gun hand. It's over. The military industrial complex is over. The prison industrial complex is over. We are creating a country in which every American will have genuine ownership. That is our goal, to get us through this crisis, as well as the general crisis that is capitalism. We're going to create a Department of Peace to help quality of life all across the world, shoulder to shoulder with nations as equals, and build a diplomatic framework so that we don't have these conflicts. And of course, in the wake of George Floyd, but also in the wake of centuries of lynchings and discrimination and Jim Crow and all of what we've seen happen to Black folk and people of color in this country, we are addressing this issue of policing with what we call our 4D plan: demilitarize, defund, disestablish, and devolve power to local communities. The police simply needs to end. Police forces just need to end. We need community care. We can have public safety agencies. We can have community care agencies that will help people that are based in communities, that are staffed by members of the community with representation and buy-in and say and power on the part of communities. We don't need this form of policing, which is a byproduct and descendant of the fugitive slave retrieval forces that existed in the days of slavery. That's where this comes from, and their behavior is rooted in that, in white supremacy. It has to end. So those are some of the distinctions, clear distinctions that make our campaign unique. We're not just talking the talk, we are walking the walk, and we are putting forward a platform that genuinely represents a leftist perspective that can make sure every American experiences genuine ownership and equality in this country's future.
Do you have anything in your platform regarding whistleblower protections or protections for journalists and publishing outlets?
I thank you so much for raising that, because our campaign has been vocal about what has happened to Assange and Chelsea Manning. We have in our platform a plank putting forward federal level protections for whistleblowers. It's absolutely necessary because of what we've witnessed, where they've attempted to abuse judicial process in order to torture whistleblowers like Julian Assange. That man has been tortured. That is what we've witnessed. And it's been a process that has involved multiple countries, but all with the long arm of this nefarious US government. I point out every time we talk about this issue, a point that a lot of people don't pay too much attention to when it comes to Julian Assange, at least not enough people will say. The fact that we witnessed his citizenship, his Ecuadorian citizenship, be yanked from him, and then him being physically yanked out of the Ecuadorian embassy. His citizenship was taken from him without due process. That was a violation of international law. So many people should have been outraged over that, and there hasn't been nearly enough outrage over that. You witnessed clear as day that it's possible for people to strip anything and everything from you in terms of rights if you blow the whistle and reveal truth about people who are powerful. That was Assange's only, air quotes, crime, because he hasn't committed any actual crimes. He made information available about powerful people, and they had to get him for that and torture him for that. That's what we witnessed. And the fact that what they did was possible, that should be a clarion call to everyone to get out there and to raise hell to ensure that we have the protections in place to make sure that never happens again, but that we also have a free and robust press in this country and internationally. This is affecting freedom of the press internationally.
Oh, you're right about that. And you're a lawyer, so maybe I'm not I don't know what type of law specifically you specialized in, but I do want to get your opinion on the superseding indictment that the Department of Justice released, uh, not to Julian's legal team, not to the magistrate who's handling the show trial, but to the U.S. press, where they, without adding new charges, they expanded the scope of the conspiracy to commit computer intrusion charge that happens to be the only one not related to the Espionage Act of 1917, but kind of shifts the focus of the State Department and the Department of Justice's case against Julian Assange, where they're trying to frame it all into he's a cyber criminal or a cyber terrorist, or as Joe Biden and Mitch McConnell in the same week called him, a high-tech terrorist. I don't know if you had an opportunity to skim through that or at all, but if you have and you have some thoughts on that, please share them with us.
All of this represents massive abuse of process, massive abuse of the judicial process. And they know what they're doing. There's nothing behind it. It's all very nefarious and very, frankly, just it doesn't hold water. And we've seen throughout this process efforts to pin all kinds of things to Julian Assange. They were trying to pin rape on him earlier. And frankly, there were prosecutors who understood the judicial system, understood the fact that this was something that had nothing and no substance behind it, and made it very clear that it wasn't going to hold up. And then magically, once they managed to get what they want, which is to get him out of the embassy, all of it just kind of disappears. Whatever they can do to get this man, whatever they can do, they're throwing everything but the kitchen sink at him, and they're frankly not playing fair in any way, shape, or form. So I have a very dim view of their legal moves. And I think a lot of people in the legal community are looking at just about every aspect, every layer of this. In fact, their use of the Espionage Act and the way that they've used it is just very negatively precedent setting in terms of their attempt to actually bludgeon freedom of the press with it in the way that they're doing. So, look, we have seen abuse after abuse of the judicial system by this country. We've seen it happen to poor Black people who can't afford a decent attorney and are left to the mercy of a public defender. We've seen it happen to people who unveil truths about powerful people. We have seen that there's very little justice in this system we call a justice system. We've seen the lengths that they're willing to go to. And what I want everyone out there to understand is that, having witnessed all of that, how can you settle for anybody coming in your face and telling you we need reform? Reform isn't going to cut it. We need a revolution. We need to revolt. The whole apple cart needs to be upturned, because everything they tell you about your rights, about justice, it's all just a shell game. It means nothing to them, because whenever it suits them, they will completely violate them all at once. You're witnessing that with Julian Assange. You witnessed that with what happened with Chelsea Manning. My heart goes out to Chelsea and the things that Chelsea went through. Incarceration, it shouldn't happen to anyone. This is fundamentally, in terms of the way they've misused the judicial system to bludgeon freedom of the press, fundamentally fascist. What you're witnessing is fundamentally fascist. And so for me to try to rationalize it in a legal sense, as someone who's educated as an attorney, this is extrajudicial. This is beyond the scope of rational legal thought. They're just making crap up as they go along to suit them.
So, there's a thing called the administrative subpoena, which eliminates the need for going through a judge and getting a warrant for the government to obtain private communications or what are branded as private communications on social media platforms. and this thing has been abused it just to no fucking end. In the last, pardon me, in the last decade, um, the U.S. Department of Justice has issued over 1 million of these administrative subpoenas. What are the steps towards either rolling that back or eliminating it, or finding some pathway of oversight to this? How does a presidential administration address a just egregious violation of both the First and Fourth Amendments like that?
You need legislative solutions for this. And as president, I would be putting forward those solutions, also working in concert with the Justice Department to that ensure that our judicial system respects in spirit, not just in the letter of the law, what fundamentally people understand to be true justice. This isn't it. So we need to eliminate it. I'm not going to shade the truth about it. I'm not going to attempt to claim reform in this system. That kind of process needs to be eliminated. The checks and balances are minimal. The supervisory aspects in terms of ensuring that it's used towards any kind of judicious and fair end, it's minimal. It should not exist.
Um, what and this is gonna go back to your platform. Does your platform address the surveillance state? Does it address both public and private sector spying, mass collection of metadata, things of that nature?
Absolutely. And we've been very vocal about the fact that we need protections for Americans' privacy. There's a conversation that's been going on in terms of the legal aspects of this for some time. The right to privacy, whether it exists, to what extent it exists in our judicial system. I think we need to have a deeply enshrined set of legal protections for Americans' privacy. And that's privacy not just against corporate data collection, but against our government. We know that both Republican and Democratic administrations have been engaged in all kinds of nefarious information collecting and spying on people. We know that that was the case in the Obama administration as well as the Bush administration. So this is one of the illustrations that there really isn't much of a difference between Democrat and Republican. That's why we need an alternative, truly left answer to these issues that we face. We have to ensure that there is a dividing line, a wall between this government and the things that all Americans deserve to have and hold and keep as private to themselves. And this present system doesn't respect that and has no intention of respecting that. Why? Well, for one thing, people's data and the things that they deserve to hold private can be very profitable to corporations sometimes. They can use and abuse that information for profit. And so we have a system which is massively funded by corporations, a political system that allows them to do that. So we not only have to end that ability to invade people's privacy, we also have to take money out of politics. That's one of the ways in which we will indirectly help protect privacy, because the corporations are motivating the narrowing of any privacy protections in regards to Americans' rights, because they want that information for profit. And then we also have to acknowledge the government's claimed interest in your personal information for what they claim is national interest, which basically is for anything they want. If they want it, they're going to claim that it's for the sake of national security. That comes to an end. They do not have a right to your private information. And the idea that they can completely scoop out all the private details of your life just because they want to, when you have a government that's capable of doing that and has been given carte blanche to do that, you cannot describe that government as in any way, shape, or form democratic or free. It isn't. And this country isn't. So our platform is going to be big about ensuring that we bring a genuine sense of freedom and democracy to all Americans, including the freedom to be free from surveillance. You deserve for the right to be free of surveillance to be respected by the United States government. Anybody involved in these nefarious surveillance, with any employee of the government under our administration, the entire apparatus set up to spy on Americans would be completely dismantled. There is no use for this in a genuinely free government or free system.
That's fucking solid right there. Dario, I have a kid melting down on the other side of this wall. So I should probably wrap here and go address that. But I want to thank you for your time, and I'd like to give you the opportunity to share your closing thoughts with the audience here. All of whom have been incredibly receptive to this, and I think some of them are seeing you for the first time. So yeah, please share your closing thoughts. Please let everyone know where they can go to support the campaign or be a part of it, and where they can find you.
Absolutely. Just to close, I just like to point out that I thank all of the many Greens that did support us during our Green candidacy. And I know that you're disappointed in what the Green Party has revealed itself, unfortunately, to be. But we are here for you. We are here for you with the true left campaign that you and that all Americans deserve. And we're going to push forward with that campaign. We're going to push forward with a true no war campaign, one that's going to ensure that we have a genuinely fair and equal system for all Americans. One that's going to address this moment that we're in, because we are in this great moment where there is an uprising to deal with centuries-long festering inequalities in regards to Black lives. And we're the campaign. We are the campaign that is going to address that. So if you'd like to learn more, you can visit our website, dariohunter.com. You can also interact with us on social media. Our Twitter handle is @Dario4America, for the number. And our Facebook handle is also Dario4America. And you can sign up through our website to volunteer, to join our email list. We wish that money was not a part of politics, but for the time being it is. You can also donate through the website as well.
Well, Dario, thank you so much for being on the show tonight. And come on the vigil again here soon. We've got, I think, 52 or 53 days left before the rendition and broad daylight kidnapping of Julian Assange in a public courtroom. And we'd love to have you back there.
Absolutely.
Wow, that was loud. So that's gonna do it. That's gonna do it for this episode of Slow News Day. I would like to thank Sleepy Josh on the ones and twos. And my name is Steve Poikinen. Good luck to us all.